a number of people came here because they know they can actually receive help
from Freedom House. There are tons of people who've actually come here, and we've helped from the parties level. And so they thought that their report was credible.
But it was not. I suspect if a similar rumor were to be spread about Congress Place, nobody will show up there because of the lack of credibility of that party, because of its failed promises, and no one takes them seriously. But I hope that they desist from doing so, spreading these rumors and wasting people's time. If there is any program that people can benefit from, they'll be made aware by us, from the party's machinery, through the media, and then they should respond to those. So I urge people to be a bit cautious about this too. This week I saw the leader of the opposition. He disappeared from their press conference, but he had Mr. Lowe go through the same old issues, absolutely nothing new. It was a non-event as usual. The same things that they have raised and we have responded to 100 times. They still persist with the argument that the PPP has no plan for Guyana. I've spent hours outlining the planning process, the continuity of our planning since we've been in office, the evolution of the task before us as a country, starting off with the National Development Strategy, which was put together in the 90s, a 7-volume document, evolving into a competitiveness strategy, poverty reduction strategy, and now the low carbon development strategy, and expanding that low carbon development strategy recently. We can point to these documents that are produced by PPP governments. The last document that APNU produced when they were PNC was from the 70s. It was called Feed, Clothe, and House the Nation, and it never happened. Under Barnum, which was from the 70s. If you look at their planning process, thereafter you will find no indigenously produced documents by the PNC. What they adopted was the so-called ERP, which was the standard IMF structural adjustment policy that they adopted as their own. That was imposed by the IMF on Guyana because we were declared uncreditworthy to borrow, and we did not, at that time, we didn't have any reserves. The inflation was triple-digit inflation. There was nothing here. So the last effort at planning by the PNC has been in the 70s. You recall, in the 5 years that they came to office, they produced a manifesto of disparate or promises, not coherent promises, not tied together in a strategy, and they failed even to implement those promises. So for them to persist with this thing every week, it's a bit like tedious. It's tedious. And you have to return to it because somewhere they're hoping that some unsuspecting, naive person would actually believe that we don't have a plan and that they have a plan. And I've said before that in every sector, if you ask us, we can detailedly outline the plan for each sector and how it fits into the macro plan. Look at their last last week, I think it was, the leader of the opposition was asked about their oil and gas plan. And he said, oh, we don't want to reveal it now. It's a secret plan, basically, and because the PPP will steal our ideas. And he then, this is, people think it's funny. He actually said that. And he said, I have a committee that advises me on oil and gas, but I can't let you know their names. So for them to come every single week at their press conferences and say, oh, the PPP doesn't have a plan, when we have outlined and we challenge them to do the same, to lay bare their plan because we have laid bare ours, they fail to do so. They came back on the same oil and gas sector, but I'm not going to even take them seriously. They have no view on the oil and gas sector, as you can see from the numerous attempts by the media to elicit from them firm positions on the issues that are before us. You may not agree with our position, some of the people, and we know in a doctrinaire way, but at least we have a position on every single matter before policy matter, that when we deal with the oil and gas companies, and we defend our policies. We state why we believe those policies are good for the country. So this is something that we need to look at carefully, the opposition. Now, we've seen recently the teachers, the teacher strike has come to an end, and they're back at the negotiating table. And many in this country would be surprised to know that the request before the government is to look at salaries since 2017, since the APNU period in office. Coretta MacDonald, who is the head of that union, who we've proven by the rules of the union should not be the General Secretary of the union, because the rules prohibit the General Secretary of the union from being a member of Parliament. She is General Secretary of the union and a member of Parliament, violating their own rules. But she talks about our government's commitment to education. But the wages and salaries they're requesting go all the way back to 2017. So wages and salaries adjustments. And so that's important for the country to know. And secondly, you know, from about March 2020 to March 2022, the schools were closed for COVID, about 2 years. There was a phase opening, so that's the extreme. Some teachers had to go back earlier. But even those years, the COVID years, their request is for a 20% increase in those years when teachers were not working. Didn't have to go, or the majority of the teachers did not have to go into the classroom or to work. They want a 20% increase for those years. So when you talk about fairness, you should look at all of these variables. I'm not going to talk more about that because the negotiations are going on. I don't want to, that the government's position will be made clear at that meeting. I've seen an attempt by Mr. Lalbachan Ram, Christopher Ram. He said my overall finding is that the government can pay much more than the 6.5% it has offered teachers. And if you look at this, I'm ashamed to say that this came from an accountant. To say he scoured the estimates and he has basically come up with some sums of money. It's utter nonsense. It's this sort of thing that every day we have to deal with. He hasn't looked at the overall impact, that it's not only teachers that have to be paid by the government, it's the soldiers, the policemen, the public servants, almost every other category. We only have 14,000 teachers of about 70,000 people who are in the public sector, or 50-something thousand who are in the immediate apparatus of the government. That's the central government, paid for by central government. So this is an attempt to influence or to gain influence. This is known, Christopher Ram, he's a specialist on everything in the world now. So he's a specialist on scouring accounts. This is public policy. This is not accounting, economics. You have to look at a ton of other variables when you decide on wages and salaries. It's not I could find $10 here and therefore you can spend it for wages and salaries for teachers. It has implication for tons of other macro variables. So Lal, Mr. Ram is something else. And I saw he did some nonsensical thing too about, since I'm at it, on the stock exchange price versus asset value. What I was attempting to do simply was to say to the reporter who asked me that this is how the market values Hess shares. And if you look at the deal announced by Chevron, it's $60 billion, but $53 billion had to deal with the share swap. Another $7 billion of debt that was part of the transaction. I saw he's confusing this with the difference between 57 and 60, that I said some $60 billion and it's really $53 billion. If you look at Chevron's own announcement, you will see that the total transaction is $60 billion because it includes $7 billion of debt. I was merely pointing out that this is how the market values this company. The market values the company differently. So it was never an attempt to go through asset value here. And I said, if we use those conservative figures, very conservative for Guyana, by taking half of the $60 billion that was part of the transaction and assigning them to the 30% shares that Exxon, that Hess has in Guyana, in the Stabroek deal, then you can simply say or easily say that we have a company that would be valued approximately $100 billion by the market, the exchange. It was not an attempt to deal with low-cut asset values. He confuses everything else. My other point was about that we have one variable that we keep forgetting all the time when we deal with environmental disasters, is that we talk about the $600 million guarantee, and then the $2 billion parent guarantee. But we forget that this company has assets that you can go to. And I said, nevertheless, we've already started working on legislation that will ensure that there would be the full liability of any environmental spill would be at the expense or would have to be taken care of by the companies that are in production, because the law will require them to do so, not just a guarantee. And secondly, that we intend to use the same legislation to expand out into other areas that we are not covered by now, that is shipping, etc. Because if someone picks up a million barrels of crude, a shipping company, and then you have a spill here, we may not be able to hold the producers liable. But we'd have to, by law now, ensure that we can hold those who are responsible for any future spill liable. I will explain all of this, that this legislation shall pass the Parliament before the recess, that we've been working on it for a long while now. I explain all of that, but they keep confusing their argument, as we have seen recently. Mr. Hunt, again in Kaichor News, and every week this is as repetitive as the PNC and APNU. Every week we deal with the same issues. So now they've come back to royalty and the calculation, and to say that Guyana only receiving 0.5% royalty instead of 2% from Exxon. So Hunt, in a letter to this newspaper published on March 3, 2024, said that the oil company was instead paying Guyana out of its profits, thereby shortening the already meager revenues for the country from royalty. The former Guyanese ambassador was keen to point out that the oil giant has been deducting 75% of the monthly earnings in the Stabroek block to recover its investment. In keeping with the provisions of the petroleum agreement, it is from the remaining 25% that Guyana receives 50%, which is equivalent to 12.5% of total revenue earned. Exxon then hands Guyana a share of its earning, valued at 2%. So rudimentary. It's a rudimentary. Can you imagine this sort of mistake? And then he reinforces this by using this calculation in today's paper to say we've lost 200 and I don't know how much, $80 million, because we're only getting 0.5%. So first of all, royalty is calculated on production minus, so total crude production minus the crude use in the operation, so transport and on the FPSOs, the fuel use. In Guyana's case, the FPSOs are operated by gas. So there is no deduction whatsoever. So royalty is calculated on the basis of production, and that's total production and total sales. Every month, they have to confirm what the average price would be, the weighted average, and the ministry gives approval for that. The weighted average of all sales. So at the end of the year, when you aggregate this, you should get total sales figure. So we get 2% of that total sale, the total sale. Not 2% of the profits. 2% of the total sale is when you calculate it. That's our entitlement. That's 2% of gross. I'm going it over and over again, so Kaichor News in particular would do that. 2% of gross calculated on the basis of weighted average for monthly sales, and then on a quarterly basis, the royalty is paid, if there is any difficulty in not concluding the weighted average, giving approval for the weighted average for the first 3 months, it gets adjusted the next month. So at the end of the year, if you add up total sales, in the accounts, you should see a gross number. And then royalty is 2% of that gross number. So for example, in 2021, if you look at the total royalty that we received, it was $59.7 million US dollars. Exxon's share was 26.9 because they are 45% of the block, so they're entitled to 45% of the crude. When we multiply that by exchange rate of 208.5, we had $5.6 billion in royalty collection. Exxon, in their financial statement for the Guyana operation, showed $5.8 billion. So what's the difference? They are 200 million higher than us. But the difference is they use a different exchange rate in converting the US dollar to Guyana dollar. So they use 216 and we use 208, but it's the same US dollar amount. It's the same US dollar amount. I don't understand how these people could read and not understand this. So we got 2% of total sales as the royalty. What might be confusing to Hunt, and it shouldn't be confusing even to a child, is that the 2% is paid from Exxon's, the contractor's profit. So in this case, the profit oil is 25%. 75% goes to cost recovery. So of the 25% of gross, that is total sale, we get 12.5%. The contractor gets 12.5%. Then he has to take from his share of the profit. The contractor has to take from their share of the profit, the 12.5%, 2% and pay it to government. So we end up with 14.5% of the 25% of gross, and they end up with 10.5%. So they would always have less than 50% when we get to 50-50 now, which is a different issue. But let me explain this first. So that is where it comes out from the contractors, the 2% royalty. It's not recoverable against cost oil, and it comes out from the contractor's share of profit. So we end up every year getting of the 25% set aside for profit oil. 75% goes to cost oil to amortize the investment. We end up with 14.5% and the contractor with 10.5% of gross. Now, when we come to future years, this is something, so we got to be very careful now, because sometimes people don't understand this. It's commonsensical, because I saw another one, the former head of the EPA, talking about, oh, we will never really get 50%. So it's always 50% of profit oil. So you always have to deduct production costs. You can't get 50% of production costs too. It's always in the future year 50% of profit oil. So you will end up using his example about getting, if you use 30% for operations, you'll have now 70% of the total sales to be divided 50-50 if the investment is fully amortized. So you get 35% there. And then we get, that's 35% of profit oil. But our royalty will still remain 2% of gross sales. So that's a different basis. So you can't add the 2%, it will be a different base. It will be 2 point something percent because it's a different base. The royalty is calculated on the basis of total sales, and it comes out of the contractor's share of profit, and it's now recoverable. And as per the PSA, the 50% share comes out of profits, not total sales. It's a simple thing. I don't understand how grown men, and who say they're intellectuals, to come up with these shoddy type of thing every day, and they get, look at the headlines they get in the newspapers, and it's nonsense, pure nonsense. Anybody could understand this. But they don't have, the motive is to fool people, to lie to them. Now, one thing I can agree with Adams on is this. One thing I can agree, that these billboards that Exxon has been putting up all around the place, they're misleading in many ways. Exxon billboards are misleading. So they said Guyana receives 52% of all profits from Starboard Block, 50% profit share plus 2%. They don't speak about the 75% here going to cost recovery. They don't speak about that. So that clouds people think it's now. In the future, we'll get a significant amount. More than 280 billion for Guyana since 2019. Creates the impression. So these billboards can be misleading. You believe that they run the country when you look at these billboards. Very misleading sometimes. So I can agree with that. But the numbers are clear to everyone. Clear to everyone. Only those who don't understand it. But when you look at the characters, Hunt, Adams, Lal Bachan Ram, and all of these, they're not interested in bringing clarity to issues. They're politicians. They support the other side. They're part of clouding or murkying the waters so that people believe somehow we're not defending the interests of the country, or we don't know what we'll do. And then Christopher Ram got away, or Lal Bachan Ram has a way of offering his services after he muddies the water. Services to fix it. It's not going to happen because very, very shoddy. So, since this is a party press conference, this is part of the same kind of ploy we've seen. The same playbook before 2015. The same organizations, the same people. So now APA, before I deal with APA, Red Thread goes off to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to complain about that they're not getting their voices heard enough in Guyana. Although they're over any paper, we have a free media here. In fact, they get more publicity than anyone would pay any attention to them anywhere in the world, in any country. So they're not getting their voices heard, and somehow that the EPA is not protecting the interests of the country. Now look at the organizations that are part of this group. GHRA, the Red Thread, which was the political arm of the WPA, which was part of the last coalition government, and the TIGI, because that's what Van der Radde quoted. The same group that was giving APNU all the free passes, sending up reports to Transparency International that they were publishing the oil contracts when they were not, saying that they had strengthened the Integrity Commission when 3 years they failed to submit statements to the Integrity Commission, the President and the ministers. This is the same Transparency International. So now they went to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. The same issues. What they didn't say to people are their political credentials, so we have to expose that. Two, how extreme their positions are. Their position is that shut down oil production here because we cause global warming. They filed that in the court cases. We cause global warming when we are already not carbon neutral, in fact carbon negative. And thirdly, that they didn't say that many of them had personal problems. So Van der Radzig had some issue with some company close to where she was living. That came up there. The news, she doesn't want the pipeline to pass by her land. So that doesn't get, the personal interest doesn't get reflected. They're fighting for country. But it's the same political group. This group never saw it fit to go to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights when the party that they supported was trying to steal the elections in 2020. That was the ultimate thing that they should have taken to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, when you try to steal the citizen right to choose a government of their choice. They didn't go there. So we've seen that happen. So now guess what happened? So the APA has gone on, and we had to point out that all of these matters were fully litigated in our courts. And all these matters that they're complaining about, either regulatory positions were taken or fully litigated here. So it's not as though they were denied a grievance process to settle their issues. They've had full use of our courts, independent courts, and they could have gone to the CCJ, which is an external court. They don't go there, so they want to relitigate now using the human rights body, which is not to supplant our courts. So the same thing happened with the APA. Now the APA has seen this. They're now going to take carbon credit complaints to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Now, so APA appealed through the arts grievance process. The grievance process was fully aired, the investigations done, and the people found that they were obstructionists. Basically, their complaints didn't have any merits about, oh, we didn't consult with anyone. When they filed these complaints, they didn't file them on behalf of the communities, because the communities didn't say we want to stop the carbon credit money. In fact, all 242 communities have already gotten their resources from the sale of carbon credit, and they have now implemented 811 projects using those resources. The communities never gave them the right to object. They talk about free, prior, informed consent. In fact, those two shows coming from the communities endorsed and supported the carbon credit program. They supported it. APA acts on their own, goes to try to block it at art, failure. Now they're going to the IACHR because they've seen the same Van der Radzig, the Red Shred gang, going there. It's again political. APA, the head of APA, was the deputy leader of APNU list in the last elections. Again political. This organization stood aside when 2,000 Amerindians were fired by the last government and didn't say a word, when they sought to undermine everything from land rights to their parliamentary representation on the Indigenous Peoples Commission. All they stood by, complicit with APNU. And now they're trying to block it. So Once the PPP is in office, all of these bodies emerge and they go off. A free pass they get. Just imagine the teachers' union. 35 years, no audited statements for the country, and they get a free ride now. Nobody pays attention. The general secretary of that union shouldn't be in parliament. Nobody pays attention. Nobody is trying to get him away. Free pass. So we don't see this as unusual. All of this will happen by these organizations. They'll try to murky the waters abroad that we are not defending the interests of the country. Nobody should take them seriously. We know who they are. They've exposed themselves hundreds of times. They have no interest in Amerindian development, APA, because the people on the ground don't want them to do this. They've made it clear they support the program that brought nearly $5 billion to those communities just last year. $5 billion to the communities. The APA, when they came to the meeting, the steering committee meeting, and I said, we'd be prepared not to do this, but you show us an alternate mechanism that will generate $5 billion for these communities. And $5 billion only now, because it will grow significantly. There is a yearly allocation. That was first year alone. You show me the alternate mechanism, not a word. So they don't want to raise money for the communities. They want to raise money for themselves. We've shown that they have received over $20 million in funding over the years. And what they've done with the money, I find out how much went to the communities. It remained in Georgetown for the leadership of the APA. So we're looking at all of these issues. We've gone through this before. It's not new. Every time, every day in the newspapers, the same old characters. They stifle young people and fresh opinions. The people who have spent all a lifetime trying to bring down this country. The same Lalbachan Ram was opposed to the Berbice Bridge. He was opposed to the Marriott Hotel. There would be a white elephant. He had to swallow all the lies that they told. The Berbice Bridge has served its purpose, the people in that region. It's been a profitable venture for the NIS. It's one of the best investments they made, profitable venture for them, and it has served national development, everyone who invested here. And the Marriott Hotel, we already know the history about that, where it is today. They're back at it again now, trying to block the new hotel, the $300 million hotel, by saying, you saw the city council, trying to say they own the land. That has been, you should read the release from Lands and Survey, the detail. This is what they've gone about all the time, perpetrating these myths, the lies, and all of it to block development. First of all, we own. Mentor has written to the president. The president must broker some arrangement between him and the president and the Qataris. They want to get at the table. And you know when APNU people get at the table what they want. That's not going to happen here. It's not going to happen here. The thing is that here it's clear. We have disproved their lies that Norton has adopted. They just want to block the project. We have talked about green space. We dealt with that issue too. It's a total lie. And he's trying to get the city engineer and the others to commit illegal acts by blocking the investment on the basis of a faulty, not a faulty transport. The last page of a transport that he didn't read the first 2 pages, as Lands and Survey said. He didn't read the first 2 pages of the same transport that he has. So this is not new. Obstruction, everything. Oh, cash grants. They have a problem with people getting cash grants. They have a problem with the children getting the money. Now they're saying we'll give more, but they had a problem with the grant to the children. Oh, we want to increase by by 50% teachers' wages and stuff, but we still now have to deal with their 2017 promises that they made that they didn't fulfill. 2017, 2018, 2019, all of that. Now the teachers union asking for us to deal with those years, the up new years. This is the typical sort of thing that we have. I've seen a report that here about sandpits. I have it somewhere that Mr. Brutus and the Commissioner of Police have permission to open sandpits. Let me make it clear that the government of Guyana on the highway has put a hold on all the sandpits. First of all, as you know, we have a difficult situation there on the highway. A number of people are living on the highway without, we've been living there for a number of years without the right documentation. There's some people who have documents that are not part of the record of in the system. We're trying to get large tracts of land to do the Silica City on the highway. So we want the land for public use, for housing and a development of new tongues along the highway, etc. So we can't wantonly give out. We have noticed that people who had sand pits were jacking up the prices. The government already opened up some public sand pits. We intend to open up more public sand pits to lower the price. So we're not giving permission for no sand pit at this time. That is the position that's clear. So if the EPA has a notice out, the government will, based on what they heard from somewhere else, to give sand pits to these two individuals, then the government of Guyana's position is clear. It's not going to happen. Now they may have the land for agricultural use. That is what people have land for, but not for the purpose of mining sand. We have to have a strategy that brings down the price. We have had about 200 applications for sand pits so far, because it's a lucrative thing now. The sand prices have gone up, and a lot of people who have these sand pits, they even on the mine, they come close to the road, they do all sorts of things. So if the story, though, I saw it in one of the newspapers, is based on what the EPA published, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I think I'll end there. I end there for today. Thank you. Yes, please, continue.
Can I ask you,
And
Dr.
please
Jagdeo?
don't. From this week, I'm not answering questions that I've gone through 100 times before. Please go on. Yeah.
And as William Sky True News, last week you challenged the leader of the opposition, Mr. Norton, to basically come up with a plan and a strategy with his secret oil and gas team in order to have the oil contracts renegotiated, and then you would probably look at it. Why don't you make the same offer to oil and gas experts like Chatham House and other international experts on the oil and gas sector, including the Minister of Trinidad, the TT oil minister, who is also willing to render his assistance to Guyana?
So the offer is available to anyone that we're one, as I outlined the conditions, that we don't lose momentum. Let me go through it again. That we don't lose momentum, so no litigation that will stop the development of future projects. That's one. Two, that the window that we have through net zero, that window be taken account, and there are a couple of other conditions, but that's available to anyone who can come up with that plan. So it's not the Minister of Oil, Gas in Trinidad and everything else. Could whoever wants to come up with that.
Noted. The opposition had said it requires, data from government to determine viability of ring-fencing the Stabroek Block projects. Have they lodged any requests to have access in this regard?
No. And who in the opposition said that?
Elson Lowe was one of the persons who would have said that they would need access to well data in order to look at the viability of the ring
What
fencing.
raw data he wants? What raw data?
Well data.
Well data?
Yes.
Okay. So the well data, how does it relate to ring fencing?
You'd have to ask him that.
Okay, all right. So the thing is that Elson Law is hopeless. Hopeless. Whatever data where we have that is not proprietary, we can share it. Whatever data we have that's not proprietary, we'll share it. But you sure Elson Law not working for another oil company that wants the data to share with them?
That as well.
Okay, all right. So you heard my position, whatever is there. But you know, my own thing is that you can give Elson Law every data. You can put him in the data room. You could actually put him in the data room and you wouldn't get any productive rework of any data. You've seen his performance there all around. He misses key points. So you could put him in the center of the data room, in fact, and it would be a great thing to have him look at it. But whatever is public, we'll give it to him if he wants it. And let's see how he will come up with this model for ring fencing.
Noted. The Minister of Natural Resources in 3 years held one press conference, and oftentimes when questions are asked, you refer the media to him. Can we expect monthly press conferences from the Minister with updates on the rapidly developing sector, given your party's commitment to transparency and accountability?
The minister will have to answer that question, how often he will hold press conferences. But we have, through various means, we have sought to make public information that is available to us. So if you look at the website now, because we believe that information should not await a question from the media, but should be publicized. We made a commitment in opposition that we will publish all the environmental protection, the environmental licenses, permits. We have done so, unlike the last government. We have published all the production licenses. We publish production data, and a whole series of data. So, and every time you ask here at the press conference, if we did not done so, you ask for large companies, the contract for large companies, we publish those. That's in the mining sector. So we are committed through a public process to make more transparent the information that we receive. But we have not had a single question, for example, that you have asked, I don't think that where we have not answered on policy. On policy. If you can find a single policy issue today that we have not given an answer to, not an answer that Kaitro News wants, but an answer to, then let me know now. A single policy issue, and that's our commitment. That's our commitment. APNU, for 5 years, never answered a single policy question. When they were asked about the 2016 agreement, now Trotman is writing a book on it. He's writing a book about the 2016 agreement he signed, that we get criticized for every single day that he signed there. Nothing. Granger never spoke about, you had a single press conference where Granger was asked about one question on policy, oil and gas policy, and he gave an answer. He was minister after he took the portfolio from Trotman. The answer is no. We have, almost every week we answer questions on oil and gas, every single week. So it's one government, but you can talk to the minister. The minister will determine his own schedule about his press conferences. I determine my schedule.
Noted. And finally, Chartered Accountant Christopher Ram.
Don't. It's wasting my time. You're wasting my time.
The publisher of the Kaitro News, Mr. Glenn Lal, and also several other citizens are all of the opinion that you are ill-suited to govern and basically be the key policymaker in the oil and gas sector.
When Glenn Lal becomes the president of the country, then as he's hoping for, which would be like a nightmare, the worst case nightmare, like in Guyana, like we just It'll be like, what, Nightmare on Elm Street, even worse than that. But when he does that, he will select who would represent him.
I'll let him
Okay,
know you
right,
send
you tell-
your best
right,
regards.
okay.
Back to the question. Would you care to respond to Christopher Ram's
No,
opinion?
no, I don't care to respond. I dealt with him already earlier in my press conference. I don't care to respond. My view is that his analyses are not just shoddy, vindictive, doesn't understand all the facts, like this whole question about royalty and calculations and stuff. Do you think Christopher Ram's accounting standards are higher than the US Security Council? ExxonMobil is a global company. They have to produce documents on their operations that withstand the global scrutiny and the US SEC. If they fudge numbers or do something illegal, the leadership there can end up in prison. The US has a robust system to protect their shareholders on the stock exchanges, etc. You think Christopher Ram or Hunt or Adams have a global standard? Yeah, global standard that would be higher than these people? These are people who write for publicity. They love to see their faces in the newspapers. They write a bunch of nonsense, create the impression. You just need to look at the performance of Christopher Ram when the kid, and cowardly performance. You heard the UG thing, cowardly performance of Christopher Ram. So that's why I don't bother with them too much. If we bothered with Christopher Ram, we wouldn't have had the Marriott. I told you all about that. We wouldn't have had the Berbice Bridge. There's lots of things we wouldn't have done in this country. That's what they want. They're of that age, where they just want to, they don't care about the next generation. Bitter people. They just want to bring everything down. Because I don't know why. They're very bitter people. So that's why I don't pay heed to his opinion about myself. About me or many, or what he says in the government. I don't pay much heed. That's why, yeah, go on.
Dr. Jagdeo, Cassie Henry, DPI. Can you give us an update on preparations for the PPP Congress?
Oh, it's going well. We have a schedule for all the things. So I don't want to give all the details because we're going through. The circular has gone out, several circulars as we prepare for the Congress. Now we have their process of verifying membership to see all the requirements from the group level, and also to ensure that people meet the requirements to attend Congress and all of those things. That's being done. So we have several working groups made up of different members of Congress. And since this year it's supposed to be Region 4 turn to host the Congress, so we have a local committee from Region 4 outside of our Congress committee to look at logistics for the Congress. So things are moving well for the Congress.
Trina Williams, Guyana Chronicle. Dr. Jagdeo, despite there being multiple reports by reputable organizations and even praises by the IMF Deputy Managing Director, Mr. Lowe still stated that there is a lack of statistics to prove Guyana's growth in areas such as employment, and he also stated that inflation should not occur in Guyana. What do you make of this comment?
Oh God, again, you're bringing me back to Lowe, that we must not have inflation in Guyana. Zero, it must be zero. We've pointed out that contrary to what they've been saying, that in spite of, which is a difficult task, we've increased the public budget significantly. We have the private sector has expanded their investments in a major way. So these all add to the inflationary pressures on a country like ours. And although that has happened in Guyana, we even now have wage inflation because there's shortages of some skills. So you have to pay more for carpenters, plumbers, etc. Wages inflation too, from many places. In spite of all of that, we have remained below the regional and the global average for inflation. We remain below the average for these areas. So, and these are countries that are, that many of them have anemic growth. They have like 1% growth, some even negative, and they still have a high inflation. Normally when a country is growing faster, there is also added inflationary pressures. So that is what the Deputy Managing Director of the IMF said. If you look at what he pointed out, that we've managed to keep the inflationary pressures. And it didn't happen by chance. It happened because we have looked at a number of things. I told you already that just the removal of the 50% excise tax on fuel has basically, it costs $75 billion. Now, not all of it is gasoline and diesel. Not all of it is gasoline and diesel, or all used to pay taxes, because some sectors for GPL, if they bring in diesel, they wouldn't have paid taxes. So the revenue foregone is probably $40 to $50 billion. If we had kept that 50% tax on fuel, that means the population had to pay that. It means industries would have had to pay a higher price for their diesel, gasoline. It means the taxi drivers, people who own vehicles. That was passed on. That's one. We spoke about adjusting the freight rate to the old freight rate, pre-COVID freight rate. That's how in calculating taxes. We've pointed out the direct input, now subsidizing electricity and water. We've been paying the fuel bill for GPL, or else the electricity prices had to go up. In spite of the global increase in oil prices in the last 3 years, we've kept those constant, water and electricity prices constant, and we have now given back the pensioners free water. All of these things were mitigation efforts that sometimes you don't see it directly, but they impact on the inflation rate and mitigating or dampening the tendency to higher inflation. Even on things like, well, I don't want to go down that route now. I already explained this many times about the numerous measures. I can list about 20 measures that we have introduced to do this. Direct interventions, helping people to adjust to higher prices, even for pesticides, fertilizers, helping the farmers to dampen the effect of higher fertilizer prices so that their net earning could be, they can maintain the net earning or get a higher earning. So Lowe has this, he believes that Guyana, I don't know in which country in the world there is no inflation. We can have no inflation in Guyana. That's it. But I don't, Lowe is, just talks the thing, he says the things that he believes people want to hear. They hear, oh, cost of living is high, so they believe it's a good political thing to say, oh, we will have no inflation, low cost of living. This is the same party that even without COVID, the pressures of COVID and higher growth in the economy had layered on taxes on everybody that led to higher costs, even in that period. So what was the second point? Okay. And the statistics. You can get statistics. Lowe has to learn how to estimate things. He is very lazy He wants us, he wants us to get the data for him, for everything. So we must become his resource person. If you're in opposition, when we're in opposition, we found the data. We found the data. To support our contentions that they were doing a bad job. We found the data, we fought on policies, we outlined what we were going to do long before we got into government on the oil and gas sector, everything else. And I saw Lal Bachanram said we promised to renegotiate the deal. Again, I would have someone send you the clip of my press conference before the 2020 elections, where I was asked specifically whether we will renegotiate the Stabroek deal, and I said no. This was pre-2020 elections. We didn't take the populist position then, but Lal Bachanram and the others are misleading people.
Okay, I have one more question.
Yeah, sure.
Taking it back to GTU, do you believe that the union strike was untimely and unnecessary, given the fact that ultimately they had to return to the bargain table? Because we would have seen Monday evening when the president of GTU was on a Facebook Live, he told teachers that they cannot have salary talks if they are on strike. Do you believe that the strike was untimely enough?
I didn't follow what he said, but we have always shown that. I saw Priya Manikchand from August of, I think, 2020. They've been meeting with the union. They gave us this. The APNU didn't address in 2017 and adjust the salaries in 2017. They're not interested in teachers' welfare. That is what we pointed out several times. You recall our first statements were, you could deduct money, we have corporate sponsors. We will pay the teachers. So that will go back to the court because they recognize that deductions were to take place. And she said, the General Secretary of the Union, Coretta McDonald, said they had a source of income to pay the teachers for the days that were deducted from them. And she also said the same thing about when we ended the courtesy, consistent with the Chief Justice's decision, Chang's decision, of deducting the Jews. She said, don't worry about that. We have an alternate mechanism, we will get MMG to collect the money for us. So that will come up in the court too, because they're not deprived of the money. They just have to collect it. As Chang said, you have to make alternate arrangements. It's a courtesy that the government has extended. So it tells you a lot about the political nature of their strike, misleading. They would never talk about the commitment of this government, the 160% or so increase in the 3.5 years we've been in office. This is a commitment to our children. The spending now has more than double per child. So we were, in APNU period, we were spending around the same sum that you have to pay for private school, about 300,000 per child. Now we're spending nearly 700,000 per child in the public health system based on this year's budget. And that is why people are saying, well, what about the efficiency of this expenditure? Because if a child can go to private school and it costs the parent 300,000, why should it cost taxpayers $700,000 per child, and you're not getting maybe the quality tuition? And they're right to raise these questions, and we have to give answers. And that is what we are trying to do, because to teach at a private school, often you're a trained teacher and a teacher with experience. They take the top teachers. And we were embarked on a process to get more of our teachers trained. That's why 2,000 teachers went through Cyril Potter College only in the last 2 years, and you have another 4,000 teachers on Gold program. That's 6,000 of the 14,000. That's our commitment to upgrading. But we have to also ensure that we have a more rigid system in monitoring performance at the school level. If you had a private school and that you don't consistently, you underperform at the head teacher level, the owners will remove the head teacher. We don't have this option. We don't have that option in the state sector. So there are lots of things based on the ratio that they agreed to, children to teachers ratio that the union signed on to on the last agreement on the APNU. The numbers of teachers we have now should be cut by half. The 14,000 we should come down to about 7,000 based on the ratio of children to teacher that they agree to. But of course we're not going to do that. Of course we are not going to do that and send home half of our teachers. But that's what they sign on to. So a lot of these things are not coming out. I hope that the teachers listen and they're not getting duped and sucked into political strike. Yeah, Dennis.
Mr. Jagdeo, Dennis Shabodamrawi. Sir, can you give an idea whether indeed there is a non-oil growth figure that the administration is probably projecting that will allow it to increase wages and salaries substantially so that you will not be left to the volatility of oil prices?
Yeah, so there is, and it's in the budget too. Last year, I think the growth was about 9%. I'm not sure, it's 9 to 11% or somewhere around that level. So that was high, because even compared to other countries in the world, non-oil growth figure. But it's not just the growth figure, right? So a lot of the non-oil growth figure also are correlated to future investments on oil. So in the hospitality sector, for example, if you're going to sustain growth in the hospitality sector, like the building of hotels, getting more people employed, higher wages, more economic activities, a significant part of the demand for the rooms in the hospitality sector and the services come from people who come here because of oil too. We're growing beyond oil because there are other opportunities now, like we've been talking, massive demand for agriculture now. The interest we're now getting. In a couple of months, well, let me say years time, you know, not just Sorn and Koya, but all the black eye. I heard how much black eye we bring in, like 50 containers per year from import black eye peas. All of that will be done just here because of the expansion now in production in many of the areas in the country. So the folk, we are not saying in the future years, Dennis, because we believe that the revenue will grow significantly, as I explained last week about on the model, once the investments are paid back for and you have a higher production level. So say 2 billion revenue now could go to 9 billion. Then you, or 10 billion. Then you're saving $5 billion, nearly 5 billion of that if it goes to 10 for the future generation. You already have a rainy day fund for the future too. So in case there is volatility in oil prices, you can also, this saving could be used in the future to smooth out cycles. That's when you can start sustaining major increases. So I anticipate you'll have a couple years more of steady increases in wages and salaries, and then significant wages as you get more revenue and the economy expands. It's not just the growth figure, it is also the revenue figure that you have to look at, state revenue. The growth figure is spectacular, but that doesn't merit itself in the same growth in revenue because of the complexities of the same PSA, how it's structured, etc. So that is what we are looking for as the revenue grows in a more sustainable way. As it is this year, over $400 billion of our revenue to finance the budget comes from the non-oil and gas sector, and about 300 billion from the oil and gas sector.
Second question, sir. Does the Guyana government believe that the replacement of Ariel Henry in Haiti and his administration will or will not complicate CARICOM's engagement with Haiti?
I spoke with the president just before I came to this press conference. I can assure you that the president of Guyana, who's chairing CARICOM now, has been engaged in a series of meetings aimed at bringing relief to the people of Haiti and resolving the crisis in that country. He has spent many hours. I've gone to State House, same on the Zoom call with CARICOM leaders, the US government, everyone else. And I'll go back 5 hours later, and he's still on the call. He's been working day and night to ensure that there is a common position accepted by all. That role doesn't get recognized, it's unseen. It's a complex situation there. There are many moving parts and many varying opinions. You have the opposition, you have Ariel Henry position, you have the CARICOM's position, the US position. You have to reconcile all of these, and then the situation on the ground. And President Ali has been at this day and night. He had just come off, he was telling me about a discussion he's had just now, minutes before I came up here. These are a complex situation. It's a disaster in Haiti now. The criminals have taken over the country. They're running the country. They've emptied the jails, and now they call for the resignation of Ariel Henry. They don't want the multinational force to get into Haiti. And the people of Haiti now don't have they don't have a government now. Haiti does not have a government at this stage. Well, Ariel Henry, who is a legitimate person, he can go back to the country. He's outside. And so they're trying to put together, the president of Guyana and his colleagues, trying to put together a mechanism that will see a return to law and order in the country and to have a government in that country. A government. Because right now, if you look at the ministers are in hiding because the criminals are looking for them. The prime minister is out of the country, can't return back, so there is no government. They're attacking the security forces, trying to take over the airport. They've taken over police stations, promising to take over the presidential palace. These are criminals, wanted criminals around the world too, many who are under sanctions. And so that's the effort is aimed at putting together the government. We can't give details, Dennis. The situation is changing by the minute on the ground. And it's a complex issue. I would urge people to read a bit more about, like the Miami Herald and many other places have some stories about this. And the newspapers are more at liberty to talk about what their sources tell them. Well, I speak for the party, but also I'm a member of the government. And because of the sensitive role that President Ali plays now and the position that he holds, we have nothing further to say except that.
Okay, I was really wondering whether how you can establish a government without Henry and his cabinet members, and will that be sort of these
I can say to you that Ariel Henry is part of these discussions. I know several times President Ali has been in touch with him, multiple times.
Sir, my next question is, what did I write? Oh, when will the Constitutional Reform Commission be sworn in?
Oh, I guess now that they're put together, I think it will be soon. I can't tell you an exact date. It depends on the president's schedule. But you know what has happened. It's like the last few weeks have been really hectic. So we want this done. This is a party promise that we made. And we promised the model. We said we are not going to tell like the small parties were telling people they're going to change this in the Constitution and that in the Constitution. We pointed out as a serious party, as the largest party in the country, the only national party, we pointed out what we have done historically. We changed our Constitution to one of the most progressive in the world. Very few constitutions have the features of ours, the Rights Commission and a whole range of features that protect people and citizens. Nevertheless, when there was a call for further constitutional reform, we said, if there is a view that we should have that, we're willing to put it back to the people of this country. And we'd use the same formula, 5 government, 5 opposition, 10 from civil society. So there would be heard, that's enshrined in our manifesto, and we'll move it along. But we don't have the arrogance of the small parties to say, we will change this, because they never got that from the people. They supplant themselves. They don't even, some of them got 20 votes and want to speak on behalf of the people. We should go back to the people to listen to them, and that's why the public hearings. So I guess it's soon, because this is not some task that we're reluctantly dragged to. it is part of our pre-election manifesto promise, and we'll get it done.
And sir, in relation to members of the police force, I know you talked about the sandpit matter earlier. Are members of the police force, including senior officers, allowed to be engaged in private business?
I don't know if there is any specific prohibition. I guess if it conflicts with your work, then that would be a major issue. But I don't know if it says that you can't have a company if there is a specific prohibition. That you can't have a company, or if you want to do a car wash in your yard, whether you can't do that to earn income. But I guess there are always conflict of interest provisions. But I can examine it.
And quickly, sir, going
back to you. I can examine it and get back to you.
Going back to the teachers' strike, you talked a lot about a demand for wages going back to the coalition period. Isn't there a continuity of employment that guarantees unions to bargain for their employers regardless of whether or which government is in place?
Yeah. I was pointing out about the duplicity also. It's not the fact that they've gone back. It's duplicity on the part of APNU, shedding crocodile tears about teachers now, when they're asking for the majority of their term in government, they had not dealt with these issues that the teachers are raising now. So it's the crocodile tear on their part, the duplicity. And they do it shamelessly. Norton, he would come and say, oh, we support the teachers. And then the majority, they're asking now to go back to fix what they didn't do. That's the teachers' union. And the second thing I pointed out about the duplicitous nature of also the general secretary of the union, who is a representative of APNU, talking about the reason we're not fixing salaries is because we're racist. You recall that? She said basically they were saying that we know it's because of one set of people, etc., implying that we're doing it because of race, and then not saying that these matters go back to the APNU days. It's duplicity I'm arguing about. You got that?
Samuel Sagnadan, NCN News. Dr. Jagdeo, we recently observed the election anniversary, 2020 election anniversary. You saw this week for the delay in the court matter, the election fraud cases. Your party concerned that this will be further delayed into the next election cycle, probably till 2025?
I think you need a serious introspection by the judiciary itself, because it's a separate branch of government, and whatever we say sometimes publicly, others may want to misrepresent as an attempt by the executive to encroach on the
territory of the judiciary, the carved out territory preserved for the judiciary. But as a citizen of this country, and also General Secretary of a party that would not have been in office had the designs of the PNC, AFC, and these individuals, Mingo, and the others, Lowenfield, Roxanne Myers, as established by the COI, because the COI, international COI, said they were participating in a plot with APNU to rig the elections. That's established by the COI. So I can quote that. Now, had they succeeded, this country would not have been a democratic country, probably been under sanctions, etc.
This is a serious matter. Look at how the United States of America is treating the attempt not to declare the results, or not to declare, but certify the elections by the Congress. People have been charged, people are already in jail, and their elections came after ours. And there are lots of people already serving jail term in the US because of that. In our case, you've had a merry-go-round. It's all transparent that they don't want these people to go to trial because the evidence is so overwhelming that it will support a conviction and jail for these individuals. And so the judiciary here, the magistracy, they're frustrating the will of the people, and they're not allowing justice to be done, and they're undermining governance in this country. Governance, because any would-be rigger or coup plotter or anything else may be emboldened by this. And it's time now that we speak up about this. You know, people talk about criticism of the judiciary. Well, I think we gotta look at these matters, contempt of court proceedings, and in the US, you can examine any decision of a judge or a magistrate openly without being cited for contempt. Here in Guyana, they do all, people are tiptoeing around the issue because they're worried about it. And I think maybe it's time that we address this legislatively, because then maybe we can bring to bear the weight of public opinion on some of these things. If there could be no self-regulation, then maybe public opinion will make people more accountable, as we have to be, the branches of the government. The legislative arm of the government has to be accountable to people or they get changed. The executive arm will get changed by the people if they're not accountable. So it can't be that only one branch of the government could be unaccountable for performance when it harms the interests of the people of the country. I'm not asking for a particular decision. We're not saying we want the person convicted or not. We're asking that you proceed with the trial. The trial. It's been too long. It's almost 4 years now and we can't get to trial. And we're waiting on the Rickford Burke matter too, because that should come up. When is that? The 16th of March, to hear about the other matter there, because I believe it's the 16th of March. I'm waiting to see what standards are being upheld here. Yes.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo. Just to take you back to the royalty, the Exxon's monthly sales price, is this public, and is the government checking to see if it's consistent with market price, like to who they're selling, in case they might be, selling it for a higher price and just...
I just told you about the standards in the US. This is a publicly traded company. If they fudge the numbers, they go to jail, their stocks would lose value, etc. It's not the Glenlal accounting here or Christopher Ram accounting. It's a global company where the US SEC looks over this. They have obligations. That's why we have had this case where not a single Guyanese company wants to list on the exchange, the stock exchange now in Guyana. They wouldn't list on the exchange because of the requirement to submit documents. The financial standards are higher. These are publicly traded companies. So what happens is that the figures, they have a third party that looks at this, with the government of Guyana verifying the figures. So they look at the sale prices, the weighted average, and then those those prices have to be approved by the ministry before they enter into the royalty calculation.
Addressed a number of issues with Christopher Ram, and you say you don't want to speak about it.
Yeah, but I don't want to.
But there's one thing clarity on, I think last week he said that he checked the balance sheet. He claimed that he checked the balance sheet.
Well,
And
I just talked about his accounting skills earlier. I talk about that.
but he's making that the assets Exxon has is not 20 billion but 7 billion. Is this true, or is his calculations off?
No, because again, it's like the royalty calculation. It's like the royalty calculation. He checked the assets. The thing is that I'm sure his figure is wrong. Let me say that. I'm sure his figure is wrong, but I will not attempt to disprove Christopher Ram, because next week he'll come up with something else. It's like Glenn Lal. You say one thing, he comes up with something else. It's the same sort of thing. So I'm not going to waste my time with the recurring gripers.
We see that Exxon has taken Chevron to court to block this merger deal between Chevron and Hess. Does this have any impact on Guyana? And can you say if it's possible for the government to step in and also invest in these same shares? And if it's possible, can they do that? Or why they're not doing that?
We'd have to find a lot of money to do that. So we have no intention of doing that. Right now, I've seen Chevron's share, the share at which the prices at which their shares are traded, took a dip, and Hess also, and Exxon's increased. As I said before, based on advice that we receive, under our laws, we are now required to approve the transaction. And that's the legal opinion we got. So really, it is a dispute over the joint operating agreement that the three parties signed. Exxon is now it's gone to arbitration to assert what it claims as its preemption rights. So in that matter, we're not a party to that matter. If you look at the implication for Guyana, as I said before, Chevron would have been a welcome addition to the number of players that we have here, because it's a big company, and often it is good to have, a number of companies here. But we have very little say over that. It's Hess who's selling their shares. They're selling the company out, and so we have little say. And it's not the company in Guyana, it's a global company he's selling.
Okay, we have been able to get expenses, the financial for expensive, Exxon's expensive in a year.
Okay. But again, yeah, all right, go on.
Yeah, we have gotten the financials for the year 2020, 2021. Can you say if the financials for the year 2022 is out, if it's public, and if not, when can we get that?
So they have to file these, okay? They have to file these financial statements. When they file them, they would be in the public domain. So I don't answer for Exxon.
Okay. We've seen we took a look at the financials, we've seen some significant costs. In the case, depreciation and amortization cost stands at 170 billion. Can you say, does the government know what is being depreciated and what is being...
Yes, the ministry would know what is depreciated and stuff like that. But I'm not going to go through any financials here, because I think Kaichur has even a more rudimentary understanding of the financials than I do, and number two, that it can't be done at a press conference. If you want to have that, why don't you submit in writing to Exxon? Ask them, we've noticed the following things. Do a comprehensive story and say this is all false. But if you don't have the data, how do you conclude that it is false or it's real. That's the problem. So these wise men sit in Kaicho News and they say, oh, you're being duped here. But they don't have any access to data. And even when they do, the formula, etc., they miscalculate, as we saw with Hunt, who didn't understand that the contractor, the royalty is paid from the contractor's share, but it's not calculated on the contractor's share of profit. It's calculated on total sale. We didn't understand a basic thing like that. So I'm not going to go through those issues here.
Just for clarity purposes, we've seen, I know you're not going to go through, you told us to write to Exxon. Does the ministry have the access to this breakdown as well? Can we get it from them?
Yeah, well, you can ask the minister that. You already do that. So you ask the minister that. Let's go on. Let's go on. I'm not entertaining that. I already dealt with these expenses and stuff like that. Kite Shore, you know why I'm not to? Because even if I gave you the best answer, the correct answer, you're going to change it. You're going to change it in any case. When it goes to Glenlal, he will put a different headline. He will say Jagdeo defending Exxon, etc. What's the purpose of me giving you any answer if it's not, you're not using it for any reason other than to lie about what we say? And so that's why it's not encouraging me to give you all data, because the story never gets written. The story never you understand it well, you could understand my view.
Not for Kite Shore News.
No, but when you want a personal, we'll meet for coffee somewhere and I'll give you a personal one. Okay, you're not here in a personal capacity. Okay.
Take a note that you have mentioned quite a few times that Suriname, although it has a better deal than us, can't get, a contract, a project going. Do you think that Guyana might have contributed to that indirectly by lowering the bar when it comes to, the contract it negotiated in 2016?
Maybe let me see something if it's already in the public domain. It should be. I saw this article. So you should read Oil Now. It's in Oil Now. Have you read the article about the deal between Petronas and Exxon for that arrangement? So this is what the article says. Statsoli said an essential aspect of the feasibility is a guaranteed tax-free period of 10 years from the start of production, a provision not uncommon in offshore. You should read the concessions here that are now part of the package to develop the gas, should it move forward. Our Suriname had a significantly better arrangement than we had compared to the Starbuck agreement, significantly so. When we announced the new terms for the new PSA, the fiscal terms, we came very close to what they have. But now Suriname is finding that to move forward, it's giving concessions that we may not even give in the future, because we've already got our industry going. And so for the development of these fields offshore, which might be, particularly if you're doing LNG, and they're standalone, and they may be marginal unless you give some additional fiscal concessions. So I guess that's their thinking now. So far, there is no project announced to Suriname at this point in time. I don't know. That's it. That's it. No project has been announced to Suriname at this point in time. But I know the government there is very, very interested in moving forward, because if they can't monetize the finds early, they could just be overtaken by other places. In the US, you see in the elections already, if you look, we don't know what will happen in the elections, but should the Republicans prevail, they've already made it clear, going to return to drilling, they'll probably expand the terminal capacity, give approval for the terminal capacity to produce and export more gas. Qatar has just practically doubled, already at a massive project, is now increasing more. So these projects, Dragon Field here in Guyana and Suriname, would be operating or we are trying to develop these in the context of those changes globally. And then Africa also has several developments that they're working on that they will bring into the supply chain. So if this happens and then there is a major investment in renewable energy, you may find that some of these projects are just stranded, that they can't move forward because they would lack financial viability. How each country chooses to incentivize those will be up to those countries. So how Suriname chooses to incentivize its gas operation now, or its development, whether they stick with the old PSA, but I gather they don't have a gas regime as yet. They had it for oil. But they now, how they develop their gas regime and what fiscal incentives they give, that's up to the government of Suriname. But I know from talking to them that that's foremost in their minds to get the developments going. And we would be happy if that happens too. It can only lend to all of us developing in this area, you know, maybe even some synergies between the two countries, some sharing, because their gas finds are close to our eastern borders. Thank you.